The questions was Representative Cox.
Thank you. You said something earlier, and I want to make sure I don't misquote you or misstate you. You talked about somewhat of a disposition. Some children or individuals seem to have a certain disposition, or perhaps there are other factors outside a video game that open them up to be more likely highly affected by a video game. I found that to be one of your more interesting statements on this subject, because I came into this hearing, as I do with every hearing, very open-minded to say, you know, what is it that I don't know about this, which is usually quite a bit. I have 4 kids myself. My oldest is 12, my youngest is 5. This is a great interest to me. Video games is something they really push me to let them do. We try to restrict the amount of time, whether it's, you know, playing something as innocuous as for my generation, Pac-Man, or you know, something like that, or whether it's something that has a little more action, if you will. Are we doing the best job we can in identifying factors? You're talking about very isolated studies, trying to pinpoint. Are we doing what we can as a whole to narrow down those effects? I guess I'm curious about your studies. Do you look at the background of the child coming in? Do they come from, you know, whether it's a background where one parent has a PFA against the other? You know,
yeah.
What types of children are you looking at to get these studies? So I'm curious more about the environment in which they're raised,
right,
and how that relates to the video game violence.
It's a very new area, looking at trying to isolate types of characteristics that are associated with people who are adversely affected by video games. I mean, in some ways it's been done before with television, that we've been with violent TV, that we've been able to associate certain characteristics with individuals who are more affected. And it turns out it's almost the same characteristics. So, I mean, not surprisingly, it's not that much different. I do have to caution, though, that most of this research is done on emerging adults, so people who are about 18. So some of this, one of the biggest misconceptions with video gaming is, even though there's about 100 studies done, in the scheme of things, we still don't know a lot. There's a lot of holes in our research. And so it's easy to poke holes in research in the entire program, simply because there are holes in it. And so certainly, like, our lab and other labs are trying to fill in those holes as quickly as we can. But what we find with the emerging adults is that across labs, so different labs that have done this research, we find that individuals who, before they play the video game, are extremely angry. So just some individuals are just characteristically more angry. Also, individuals who are somewhat neurotic, so they're very moody and unconscientious, are the ones that are most affected by violent video games. So it'd be kind of your classic case of a person who's angry, they don't have good impulse control, and they're very moody. That they're a danger before they play video games, certainly, but the video games kind of intensifies this characteristic. Again, I want to be careful, though. Even when I talk about this intensifying of characteristics, it's not leaping up. The correlation numbers don't leap up to 1 or anything. They just go up slightly, maybe closer to like 0.25, whereas for everyone else it's a little bit lower. So even these people who are adversely affected by it, it's not like it's taking control of their lives. It's just that they tend to be more affected. One way to think about this idea of some people being differently affected by it is kind of like, it's very similar to allergies. So, you know, we could open up a bag of peanuts and a lot of us would be perfectly fine with the peanuts. But if somebody has a predisposition to be allergic to peanuts, they're going to be affected by that. Same thing with violent video games. For the most part, most people can play violent video games and the long-term effects are not these gigantic effects. But for a few individuals, it certainly might, if you will, kind of hype them up and make them more excitable and potentially more aggressive. The other thing I forgot to say this earlier, so to just go back, most of our outcomes when we assess aggression are not aggression like punching people, kicking people, getting arrested. There are a few studies that have done that correlationally. But most of our assessments of aggression are simply elevations of general tendencies of aggression, or perhaps in an artificial setting, you know, thinking you're hurting a person with a little bit more noise blast than not. So our outcome measures that we use to assess aggression are really also proxy measures to assess real-life aggression. And so even when I talk about our effect size as being about 0.17, there's a good chance that the real effect size as far as the real aggression might even be lower than 0.17 since we're kind of using these proxy measures. So certainly everyone who scores high on a measurement of aggression is not going to go out and punch somebody. They're more likely than those who score low, but they're not all going to do it. So that 0.17 is might even be a little bit overinflated for the general person. Again, it's not going down to zero though. So it is important to remember that they do have some effect, but it's just that this effect is small and it affects different people differently.
Thank you.
Representative Waters.
Thank you. Thank you for being here today, Dr. Markey.